Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Unscripted Success, the real talk about confidence, boundaries, and fit at work. My name's Laura Rattray-Wood. I'm one of the Alumni Engagement Managers at Griffith University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and host you for today's event. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting and pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So you know this session is being recorded and a stenographer is providing live captions. To access these, please click on the link provided in the question and answer section of today's webinar. Today is a unique opportunity to hear from Lisa Chang. Lisa is a counsellor and project manager with Griffith University's Student Wellbeing and Accessibility team. She brings a wealth of experience in embedding mental health and wellbeing into university life, working closely with both students and staff through counselling, workshops and supervision. Lisa has a Masters of Counselling and a fellowship from the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine. Joining Lisa is Griffith alumnus Brooke Clancy. Brooke is a marketing and brand strategist and founder of Marketing Bud, where she empowers small business owners to grow through smart and authentic brand building. With a background in project management and brand strategy, Brooke has worked with organisations like Experience Gold Coast and the Griffith Institute for Tourism, and was previously brand and marketing manager at the Gold Coast Suns. She brings deep insight into customer engagement and branding across a variety of industries and business sizes. Ahead of Brooke and Lisa starting the session today, I just wanted to let you know that we will have time for questions at the end. So please put your questions into the Q&A section and we'll filter those through so Brooke and Lisa can answer them when they've finished their initial presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Brooke and Lisa and let you take the reins.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that lovely introduction. And I might just bring Brooke on screen for a moment. Yeah, and this to see everyone. And so, but what we'll do, how we're going to do this, we're going to do a little bit of some information first before we dive into that real talk that we want to get to with Brooke. So what do now, Brooke? I'm going to share my screen and I'll bring you back on stage in a very short moment. Okay, I think everyone can see my slides. And I might take us off there for a moment, Brooke. And then while we just focus on the slides for a few minutes where we go into it. So let's start first by acknowledging again, and I want to do this as well, to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands that we are meeting today and paying our respects to elders past and present and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Today I'm at the Brisbane South Nathan, which is the land of the Yuggurabal, the Yugara, Jagera and Turrbal peoples. This has always been a place of deep learning and sharing, and I want to acknowledge that inherent wisdom in these lands that we're coming from. So let's start talking a little bit about feeling like an imposter. Know that you are not alone. The majority of people will experience at least one kind of episode of imposter phenomenon in their lifetime. And this is known as that intense feelings that their achievements are undeserved and the worry that they are going to be exposed as a fraud. But we kind of think of that as, oh my gosh, such a challenging situation, but it's not all bad. Feeling doubtful can be a sign that your abilities and your skills are growing. And in this world of the seeking of constant comfort, it's common to kind of shrink away from these feelings of discomfort and pain. But just like when we were growing up, we were going through our teenage years, and we had these growing pains, extending your abilities and skills can often feel kind of uncomfortable. And this is a point that many people start to give up when they don't see progress and they are experiencing a little bit of discomfort and pain. And this is what can also be called the valley of disappointment. And if you've been reading a lot about habits and atomic habits and things like that, you'll be quite familiar with that term where you're putting a lot of effort in, but you're not seeing those rewards in the initial days. So this can feel a little bit like failure, but it actually isn't. So it's important to recognize what growth feels like versus what is not a good fit. And we were going to dive into that together with Brooke in a moment. And also the feeling of recognizing a skill gap versus a feeling of lowered self-esteem. And a lot of that is in our self-talk and the story that we put around this. We might tell ourselves, I'm not good enough. I haven't done this before, is the actual truth of the matter. So there's a big difference between having that skill gap, which can be developed, and believing that you aren't enough, which is really damaging to your self-worth. This is why confidence is less about feeling sure about yourself and more about showing up anyways. It's something that we build through action, just like a muscle. You don't feel strong before going to the gym. You go to the gym to get stronger. And confidence kind of works in that same way. And this brings us to that idea. And I think a lot of us have heard this term of fake it till you make it. But I want to switch that up and think about it as facing it until you make it. Because we're not trying to pretend to be somebody that we're not. And that can kind of add a little bit of pressure onto ourselves. But actually facing that challenge with authenticity, that honesty, and that effort that we're going to put in. And being real about what we know and asking questions and showing up is how we build that authentic muscle. Brene Brown reminds us that authenticity builds trust and trust builds sustainable success. So here are some strategies to deal with those feelings. If you're feeling like an imposter, you can acknowledge that your achievements by recognizing your skills, learning, success, and growth as a professional. And you can keep it in a journal or in post-it notes and kind of look at it regularly. Seeking feedback from supervisors and peers can help you to gain a realistic perspective on your performance. You can set realistic and smart goals by breaking tasks into manageable, time-limited steps and setting achievable goals to build that confidence gradually. You can challenge thoughts of self-doubt and replace them with realistic, positive affirmations about your abilities. And being realistic and evidence-based is a real crucial part of that. And what I mean is that things that you have achieved and things that you can recognize that you have accomplished. Share your feelings with peers who may be experiencing some of these similar challenges, and that can feel really validating and help you not feel alone in that space. If this imposter feelings can impact on your well-being and you're really struggling with that, you can consider seeking some professional support. Okay, so enough of me just talking through a lot of these things. I'm gonna now bring Brooke and myself, hi, and pull the slides off for a moment as we have a bit of a chat. Okay, Brooke, it's so wonderful to have you with us. You bring this wealth of experience and in navigating a lot of these challenges. So I think my first question to you as we're thinking about this is, how do you know when to push through discomfort versus when to ask for help? And the other part of that is also when to stay and when to go.
I love that. Now, I hope I'm still going to be answering that question by saying I think you can do both. I think I just love how you reframe that to face it instead of fake it. I'm not someone who's ever related to that fake it till you make it. I think sometimes I just sometimes just blurt it out, and sometimes I end up being too honest and I unveil and everyone can see. So, but I also think that's a positive. So I really love that you're saying face it. But I also think, and particularly as we know even more now than ever, it's really important, as you mentioned, to share how you're feeling as well. So one of my very first career advisors, even in high school, had always mentioned to me, take any opportunity that you can. So for me personally, I've always tried to stay true to that. If something is presented to me, like today, for example, I'll definitely jump at that. Recently, I don't normally MC events, but someone had asked me to MC an event, and immediately I felt sick in my stomach, and I thought, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be stressed about it. But I said yes straight away, and I thought I'll work it out later. But I think, yes, definitely still asking for help, talking about it, working through what you maybe feel uncomfortable about, and implementing some strategies that work for you to help you feel more confident, knowing that I just love when I hear people say it's natural to feel nervous, because it's very relatable. Even someone who is very experienced I remember a previous director telling me that when I had was previously really confident public speaking, and went through about a phase of a year where it's like I had anxiety around it. And she just said to me, even when I get up and speak, I still feel nervous. So I think it's about pushing yourself into those areas, but working through strategies that work for you. And for me, definitely, previously, before being a mum, probably I was a little bit more organised, had a bit more time to really plan for things and set routines around things that made me feel more comfortable. So even though when I was heading into that uncomfortable situation, I somewhat felt a little bit more prepared.
That's wonderful, Brooke. When you're talking about this kind of reminds me of this saying that I heard from a podcast that she was trying to, I think she was actually a neuroscientist, and she was talking about her daughter playing, not playing sports, sorry, in martial arts. And her martial arts instructor said, get your butterflies flying in formation. And that, because you're going to experience the butterflies, you're going to experience that nervousness. And I think it's quite often we kind of pathologize this feeling, or we kind of think, oh, this is bad, I need to get rid of it. I need to get rid of these feelings of anxiety. But what if I reframe that? I think this feelings is necessary for me to do the job that I need to do. And this feelings of butterflies in my gut is a crucial part of that energizing, that focus and that concentration that's going to get me to perform at my best. But I just need to get my butterflies flying in formation and targeting towards what I need to do. So I love it when you talk about that level of discomfort is a normal part of life, that we shouldn't run away from that. And in fact, that when you say like, oh, people will look at you, Brooke, and they say like, oh, you must be really lucky. But then when I think of it and I hear your stories, it's that you jump onto opportunities. You see opportunities that present themselves, and you think, I'm going to do that. I'm going to, grab hold of that opportunity to present, to do these things that are, out of my comfort zone, and stretch and learn and grow in that space. Has there been ever a situation, Brooke, where you have thought, and thinking about, is this a time to stay or is this a time to go? And how do you know that for yourself?
I think definitely, and particularly your loved ones around you will notice. I know in previous situations that are where it's come to the end, where I've sort of thought I need to start looking for other opportunities, and that's when you start talking to your loved ones, and they can kind of really, they will have seen that change in you most likely in sort of your behaviour outside of work as well. So I think talking to them about it can be a huge thing as well, and then they can kind of reconfirm what you were maybe already thinking, because they will have noticed that in you as well. But I definitely think, always, thinking about your long-term goals as well will always help them. Decision. For me, that definitely has sort of guided me along the way, in terms of thinking about where I wanted to be long term, as someone who's always tried to sort of more pre-plan, although Lisa, when we were chatting, and which I know we'll get into a little bit later, I feel like there's sort of two versions of me, one before kids and one after kids, and how I've changed quite a bit. But yeah, definitely chatting with your loved ones, thinking about your long-term goals can really help you make those decisions as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Brooke, for that. Let's dive into a few more bits of information about those values and fit at work, and we'll come back to our discussion again, Brooke. Great. Okay, so that was the chat time. Now moving on to looking at values. The thing about values, though, is that sometimes we kind of learn about that when we're in school, and we kind of discover our values, and we think that they are fixed and set in stone. And that can be quite challenging for us to navigate because, we feel like, okay, some things are not aligning with my previous values. But in understanding values, we need to realize that they evolve, they shift, and they reshape themselves throughout our lives. And that is expected and desired for us to continue to figure out what our values align to. You might have that strong sense of what mattered to you when you were studying. Maybe it is about freedom, achievement, impact in the world. And there's nothing wrong with those. Those are wonderful values. But maybe when you move, and suddenly when I was talking to Brooke, as you move into this working world, you start to have a family, you have new challenges, you might have different goals, and your priorities, they can change and they will change. And that's not confusion. That's actually growth. So when we look at socio-ecological systems theory, that reminds us that our values are influenced by the systems that we are part of. And that is personal, social, cultural, professional, our stages of life. And those systems, they shift, and it's natural for our values to shift alongside them. Success isn't some fixed milestone that we kind of aim to reach. Think of it more like a compass that points, and that values alongside it points us to what matters most to ourselves. And it's about that right now. And we don't know how that's going to change into the future. When your actions and your decisions line up with those values, you're more likely to feel engaged, motivated, and also being more well. That's not just a theory, and it's been shown as well in the research by Kessler and Ryan, that found that people who align their goals with their values have a greater sense of well-being. So how do we then recheck our values each time? Because it's important to think about what we want and what is important to us right now. So we can use things like reflection tools. Like there are lots of values that you can find on the internet. There are lists, there are cards, there are questionnaires, and you can also speak to a career coach that can really help you to distill what is important for you and how you define success for yourself and what does it mean on your own terms. So let's then shift and talk a little bit about comparison. You probably heard this saying before, and maybe there's a few sayings in here that you've probably heard before, that comparison is the thief of joy. And that, I feel that is very, very true, because if you're measuring your success, your progress, where you're at against someone else's yardstick, that can make you feel like you're left behind, or you're inadequate, or maybe sometimes you've made mistakes and you've taken wrong turns. What usually happens, though, is that we are not comparing facts, like exactly where a person is. We're usually comparing it, our daily struggles and our challenges, to someone else's highlights of their day that they're featuring or they're talking about, or on Instagram that you are seeing. We also hear this phrase, right, that the grass is always greener on the other side. But what if the grass is always greener where you water it? And I was hearing that echoing in what Brooke was saying, is that what you invest in is what you're going to sow. And so that is really important for us to focus on and think of. In other words, that growth, that fulfillment, that satisfaction often comes not from chasing the next thing, but from investing in your own journey, even if it looks different from other people or from what you thought it might be in the past. So if you ever felt that twinge of jealousy. And, just being honest here, I think we all do. We can kind of criticize ourselves for that. But what if we used it as a signal to tell us what is underneath this sense of jealousy? Maybe it's telling me that there's something, there's a need or there's a value that I haven't yet kind of honored or aligned myself with. Maybe it's a reminder that my current role is not where I want to be, and it doesn't align with what I care most about now. So instead of feeling that sense of shame that we can have about these challenging emotions that arise from us, and one of them being jealousy, we can get very curious with our own emotions and using it as a prompt, and not as a judgment tool, but really being able to prompt that sense of there's a need here to reflect. So when we become clear on our values, we kind of are less likely to get pulled into comparison, and a lot of comparison. We can start to let go, I think, of a lot of societal or conventional kind of pressures to follow in somebody else's footsteps and follow a path of success that we was maybe laid out for us by society, but maybe by parents, by our own ideas of what success might look like. And I think it's just telling ourselves that that's okay. And that's okay that our path might look different. And that difference is often something unique, and it's a unique strength about us. Okay, so let's now hear a little bit more about how Brooke has handled some of these things. Okay, Brooke. Let me put that slide off so you get to see wonderful Brooke on screen with me. Let's talk about how have your values changed since graduating? And you've gone through quite a few career kind of shifts as well. And how, if you think of it, how do your values kind of shape these changes in your career?
Definitely, for me, hugely. I would firstly start by saying I would not be working for myself. Have started marketing, but if I didn't plan on having children, for me, that was definitely my key driver, was that flexibility. Not to say you don't want the flexibility if I wasn't going to, but for just me personally, that was a key driver for me. I would definitely be still working in a corporate environment, trying to get the next higher level position if I didn't have my kids. And I wanted to have that flexibility that having my own business brings for me. I definitely started my career just kind of, I guess, falling into an industry where I had work experience and then was really passionate about that, and was really wanting to learn from mentors and others as much as I could. I was always really wanting to, I guess, climb that ladder, which I did to a certain extent, before really knowing that what sort of was to next come for me and the kind of lifestyle that I wanted to have as well. Definitely having lots of great mentors, most of them informal over the years, lots of other women as well, being able to see their lifestyles and what they wanted to do as well and what was important to them, but really helped me sort of form that, or just sort of look ahead and sort of start to plan out what I sort of wanted that to look like. And definitely being able to do that has, I think, really helped me as well, be in the position that I feel comfortable with now.
Yeah, if you think back, that transition zone, I'm. It sounds. I mean, like for me, thinking about it, it sounds like a really challenging, thought to go, I'm going to go out on my own. There's probably lots of like challenging thoughts that run through your head. Let me know what were some of the really challenging things that happened for you, or you were thinking about, and how did you overcome them?
I think for me, and I don't want to try to make it sound too basic or like it was too simple, but I guess when you have when you do something over a long period of time, it is a lot less stressful. So I thought it was something that I was sort of working towards. So I started doing marketing, but in my lunch break and after hours, about a year and a half before I ended up having my first little boy. If I wasn't even pregnant or anything, I just knew that what that role needed from me at the time. I was working for the AFL team, the Gold Coast Suns, that I just felt like I wasn't going to be able to fully commit myself at that time. Keep in mind, this was pre-COVID, so very different working environments now. So yeah, that really drove me into be able to want to do that, and having that support of my partner as well really helped me feel confident to be able to do that, and chatting with others that had done the same. So I really made sure I was doing learning from them, some of the challenges they faced, some suggestions that they had. But yeah, I don't want to make it sound too, but doing it all over a long period of time made it seem less daunting to me. And I felt sort of comfortable, like I was comfortable with what I had achieved at that point and was ready for that next step.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had, you were confident in your skill set. I think that it was one of the crucial parts, that you felt that you had enough experience, enough connections, enough trying out of these different aspects of owning your own business, that you felt ready to take that next step. So it wasn't like an overnight kind of decision. There were steps that you took towards that. Does this sound accurate for you?
I must say, I can definitely relate to the imposter syndrome, because no, I didn't feel, I think definitely like on the daily, that those feelings, probably less so now in the little phase I'm in at the moment, but can come into your mind daily. And when I did start working for myself, I felt like I had to offer everything to sort of be able to be able to really help that client, whereas now I'm much more clear on like what I'm more specialized in, who I can connect you with that is in other areas. But yeah, I definitely can relate to that imposter syndrome that you were showing before, and I'm so relieved and think it's amazing that you're talking about these topics, which I felt like which I feel like I've never really spoken about in this sort of setting, which I think is amazing. So no, I felt comfortable with jumping into it, more so because my flexibility and family situation was the key driver, and I had the support from those around me, but I definitely didn't feel comfortable in all elements at all.
Well, that's so reassuring, I think, to hear from you, Brooke, as well, because unless when they look at your success stories, they might think, wow, she has it all and she has it all planned out. But it was a struggle, and there were stages, there were doubts, there were things that came into your mind. But I think another key for you as well is that your values kind of shifted, where your children, your family became the top value. And because that was the center of it, you could feel a little bit less pressured by other sort of achievements in your life, because that kind of move for you. And I mean, I echo that as well in my own kind of journeys. Sometimes stages of life and external pressures can help you to sort out what is important to you at each point of time as well. Wonderful. Okay, let's dive into the last segment before we get back to our chatting. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so the last thing I think we want to talk about is this word which I was talking to Brooke a little bit about, and it's like a little bit of assumptions and myths surrounding the term of boundaries, and a lot of ideas around that when you set boundaries, they are about other people, but actually boundaries they're not about anybody else. They are specifically about you. They are about what you will do when you're faced with circumstances that do not align with your values. And these boundaries are about keeping yourself well enough to keep showing up, especially in the long run, for what matters most to you. And as we heard from Brooke, that shift in the values of what matters most to her helped her to align the next step and direction, and gave her the strength and the confidence, even though it was shaky confidence, as we always experience, to show up for what matters the most to us. So some research here by Chapman and Gatz reminds us that healthy boundaries are directly linked to our emotional well-being. And when we're constantly overextending or trying to meet everyone's expectations, it's actually not sustainable, and it's not something that we should strive to do. So one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself is to actually say no. And this makes space and room for a more meaningful yes. And I can tell you that this is not easy, and it is a struggle. I think for a lot of us, I come from a culture, a collectivist culture, where we, strive our best to please other people. So saying no is challenging, but learning to say no is a really important part for meaningful growth and intentional growth in your space. So saying no to overtime might allow you to say yes to rest, and saying no to project misalignment with your values might actually allow you to say yes to something else that actually aligns with what you are best at doing and what you want to grow in. So recognizing what boundaries are for you, and that boundaries are about you, it means that you are making choices for yourself and not for others. So, and recognizing that there are consequences to all of these actions that you do. So when if you don't want to work on Fridays to manage your own well-being, that doesn't mean that you're entitled to a salary on Fridays. And you might get passed up for promotion compared to staff that have a little bit more input and output. So it's important to bear that all in mind, but still make the most sustainable kind of decisions for yourself. So boundaries, they are, they're not selfish. They're in fact essential for resilience. And when we constantly ignore our own limits and we overcommit, we can deplete our capacity to care about ourselves and about other people that mean a lot to us. We must know our own limits and tune into what we need to take care of ourselves. As the saying goes, and I've got quite a few in here, we can't pour from that empty cup. So we need to make sure that we have that emotional capacity to give, or we find ourselves snappy and resentful. And most often this occurs to the people that we love the most, and even to ourselves. So there's some literature here on burnout that shows that poor boundaries are one of the major contributors to chronic workplace stress and emotional exhaustion. And it's important to remember that nobody else is going to do this for you. It is an act of self-kindness, and it is about getting yourself to a point where you're okay with the consequences that you're setting for yourself. Also remembering that boundaries is not about this line in the sand. It's rather about having this guidepost, which I will have in the next quote, and being kind of clear about what matters most to you. And it's also about taking responsibility for our own needs rather than expecting other people to kind of guess or accommodate us without us taking that first step and communicating what we need. So that's an important part. So you can't have it all, but you can have what matters. So every boundary comes with a trade-off, and that's not a problem. That's the actual point. Boundaries aren't about having it all. They're about choosing what matters most to you. Saying yes to sleep might mean saying no to late night work. And the key is not to avoid these trade-offs, but to make them intentional. Know where you're going, know where you want to be, what is important to you, what are you aligned with your values, and what is sustainable for yourself. So that intentionality is a real key part of this. And here's something that we don't talk about enough. Other people are not going to always understand your boundaries, and it's okay, because it's not about them. Remember, it's about yourself. They might feel disappointed in you. They might push back, and they might not, give you the things that you want, but we cannot control other people. And that's really important to remember as well. Boundaries are about yourself. Your boundaries don't require permission, but they require you to be okay with them, and they require clarity and consistency. You don't need to convince others that your limits are valid. You just need to align them with what is important to you, and you live through that alignment. It's important to remember as well that boundaries are not just a one-time, same as the values, set it and forget it kind of situation. They are going to change, they're going to evolve. And as Brooke has talked about her story, you can see that there is a changing in what she wants to offer, what she wants to do. And that's important. What you need in your first job may shift as you grow in confidence or you take on new roles. Life circumstances will always change. Energy levels are going to change as as I grow into my older years. I may or may not be as zestful and as vibrant as I am today. And so my boundaries might shift with that as well. And this is not failure. And there should be no shame associated with that. This is that development of that self-awareness. So one of the other quotes that I have here is, boundaries aren't walls. And there aren't walls to push people away. There aren't walls to keep ourselves in and other people out. They're just guideposts for living with intention. And the intention part, I think we need to highlight that. This helps us to navigate the chaos that can happen in our lives, helps us to make decisions with clarity, and keep moving towards the career, to the life that actually works for us. Okay, that is the end of the formal information part as we look to what Brooke has to say. Hi, Brooke. Okay, well, let me just put that chat box off as we come into this space again. And this is something that we've had a bit of a chat about as well, and thinking and seeing it in your career journey as well. So let's talk a bit about what has been your journey with understanding these boundaries. And you can see them all kind of interconnected with your values and setting the direction for your company. So think about it personally, but also maybe in your company sense. What have you learned about setting boundaries, and what does it actually look like? Give us an example in practice.
I love this. And you really helped me understand, Lisa. When I first heard that, I thought, oh, I think I'm a little bit old. I think I'm past this. I feel like boundaries weren't a thing when I was in a corporate work environment. But you really helped me understand that it's really about how you sense and feel things, and how you deal with something as well, that in yourself, which I think is incredible. For me personally, when I was thinking back to in my early career, boundaries for me, I definitely wasn't aware of that term. I don't think it was around then. It was more so around just having routines, my sort of everyday routines, but also being flexible when I think flexibility is important as well. And I love how you really referenced there that if you are wanting certain flexibility and that type of thing, there will be some trade-offs, and feeling, are you okay with that as well? Which I love that you referenced. So even just thinking of an example in my early career where, I went to the gym in my lunch break. Seems like something simple. It was about 15 minutes longer than my lunch break. But because I did used to do a little bit of extra work, my manager was completely okay with that. So I think it's about just having those conversations, working with what's important to you in your routines, times that you would normally be leaving the work environment, that type of thing. And I think just setting what was for me at the time my normal routine kind of just helped me kind of have those boundaries, I guess, without necessarily having to think of them in that way. And I think for me now, before chatting with you, I probably would have thought, I don't think I have these boundaries, but you made me realize, yes, I do. And I probably set them now without even realizing. So just knowing that for me, working remotely is really important. I love that flexibility to be able to not be screaming at my kids to rush out the door because I'm going to be 10 minutes late for work because it is only me. Obviously my clients, but for them, I can be getting work done at any point of the day as long as what they need is delivered. It is there for them. So being able to have that flexibility is key for me now. So different clients or work opportunities that will come about, I really keep that top of mind. Being realistic about when you can deliver deadlines as well is really important, I think, too. And making sure that you're not sort of putting yourself under pressure that isn't really going to play out or work out well, as well is key. And I did also just pop some other notes in the chat there as well, just other thoughts, sort of notes that I made through a few other topics that we're talking about as well.
Wonderful. Brooke, you talked a bit about your company. When you first started it, you tried to do everything, like you tried to fulfill all the clients' needs. And I suppose there was a point in time where you realized, okay, this is unsustainable. I'm going to burn out, and this is not my expertise, and I feel completely diluted and pulled out by trying to fulfill all these needs. And I can imagine that first kind of conversation that you had with your maybe old client, new client, about what you exactly would do. How can you take us through that experience with you?
I think just realizing, and I guess like everyone else, we're all listening to different podcasts all the time where we're taking little things from. And I think for me, just wanting the ideal that we all want, which isn't always the case, of wanting to really try to do as much of that work and task that you're really passionate about, and that doesn't really feel like work to you because you're loving that the most. And that definitely isn't always the case for me. Let's be realistic. But I think pushing in that direction really helps you realize that. And then also you want to do the best. Well, I want to do the best that I can. So if it's something that I really don't think that I'm great at and it's making me feel bad, I then realize in my personal life that I'm feeling crap about something, so I'm extra stuffy and not nice to those around me. It really is like a roll on. So the more that you can be focusing on that, being real about what you're achieving and your goals, I think that really helps.
Wonderful. Excellent. So what we might do now is we might go into some of the Q&A questions that may have popped up. And I think I saw a message, Brooke, for you to pop what you have into this Q&A section so that students or the guests can receive it. Okay, Catherine, I can see two questions. Catherine asks, you mentioned that doubt is a sign of growth, but how can we tell the difference between healthy self-reflection and unhelpful self-doubt that feeding important? I think that's a really great question. And I think that's something that we try to kind of talk about. How do we know when we have these feelings that it's something that we need to push through, and it's something that that we can, it's not a good fit, it's time to kind of cut our losses and move to a different space. Brooke, do you have any insights of something like that that's happened for you?
I think for me, look, to be honest, most times I felt so uncomfortable all the time, and I think people probably do on the daily. And I think that coming back to those, being able to know that it can be a really normal feeling, but being able to chat with others around you, work through some strategies, do some pre-planning if that helps you, really does help. But I think that knowing that, not that it's going to be all day, every day, but knowing that those moments will come up, and then as you've highlighted, it can really be that growth that you are focusing on, to really jump out there and do it, and not be, well, definitely for me, if there's others in here today, and which most likely I can imagine you might be able to relate because you're all very proactive people listening into a webinar like this today, not striving for that perfection and having to let go of that. For me, it's been huge. And then also feeling like the way you show up when you're feeling uncomfortable, it doesn't have to be in a perfect way. You're okay to show, that you are learning. And then another, hopefully it can come up in the chat. I don't know if it's been visible yet, some notes that I've put in there, but knowing that you're not expected to know everything and be perfect, particularly when you're in those early years of your career after graduating. People don't expect that from you. They're really, wanting someone who wants to show they can learn, working with others as well. So that's all part of the process, I think.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Brooke. And I think when I reflect on that, there isn't a manual or tick box that you can go to and say, okay, is this self-doubt? Is this healthy self-doubt, or is this means that I need to leave this space? And it's a really, I think it's a complex situation. It's an individual and personal situation. I think we need to recognize for ourselves where we are in like our stress kind of curve. And if we're in a space that we're feeling that it's unsustainable, it's pushing us to a space where no matter how I try to reframe situation or things that I put in to try to take care of myself, it's really impacting on my well-being. Maybe it's that the time and the amount of work that is required for this job, and it's so far beyond my skill set that I feel like I'm in those strain zones all the time. And when we look at the Yerkes and Dodson kind of curve between productivity and stress and pressure, that kind of thing that happens, is that when we go into that, really into those strange zones, it can be a little bit of a slippery slope, and we have to determine for ourselves and where we're at that point of time, because sometimes we're not at that point where we can take on that challenge, and that's okay. And we've got to be kind to ourselves and say, like, maybe in the past I would be able to face this challenge, I'll be able to face this level of self-doubt and want to push through and want to prove to myself that I can do this and I can accomplish these things. But maybe at this point in time, I have so many other competing factors, my children, my life, my finances, and everything, that I need to be in a space where some of these things are not challenging and pushing for me. And that's okay. And I think we need to kind of normalize the decisions that we make for ourselves that don't align with traditional kind of career paths. So I think it's an individual reflection that doesn't involve anybody else's judgment or anybody else's points, and even your own self at different points. So even that comparison to yourself, when I was younger, I could do this and do that. Then why am I struggling with that now? And so it's just taking that all into consideration. There is no kind of wrong answer when you are, holding your own values, your own energy, and you're looking at all of that and you're trying to balance it out. Making those decisions to take care of yourself in that space, there's no wrong answer in that. So that's how I feel about that question. Catherine has another one here. Oh, wait, let me look. Sorry, I think I'm jumping. Okay. Roxy says, how can we practically reframe jealousy or comparison to something that serves rather than sabotages us? Anything to add for that, Brooke?
Sorry, I'm just reading on here again to make sure I've got
Yes.
comparison to something that serves us. I think I love your points around mentioning, like, really looking at the details of that. So around, what is it actually that's really bugging you or making you feel like that? Is it something that you feel like you maybe need to focus more on in your career or lifestyle, or something you're wanting to do? So that might just sort of help you sort of go through that values process again. I love that you did that. It's definitely not something, I sort of revisit it top line each year in terms of my goals, but it's definitely not something I've done for a long time. So I think if you can go back to sort of that process again, that can potentially help there as well.
Yeah, and I think like some of these challenging emotions are interesting for us to go through. And I definitely, as I've grown as a person, catch those emotions coming up for myself. And it's kind of like a personal practice where instead of the natural, normally what happens for us, we feel something, we get absorbed into it, we believe it completely truth at that time, and that there's something needs to be acted on and push us into that trajectory. But when I experience now sometimes these emotions that arise with us within seconds, we might see something, we might see our friend bring a new handbag or something that we want, and we can feel this sense of bubbling, this really simple description example, but you can feel this sense of something bubbling up within you. And and sometimes we just overly identify with that emotion. Those emotions, they're very natural, they come. And when we investigate those emotions a little bit further, we can see, okay, what is this jealousy telling me? Maybe it's telling me that I'm really tired and that I wish that I had an easier life, like, what is it telling me when I look and I see my friend has home cooked dinners all the time that she didn't have to make? What do I feel about that? What is it telling me about something that I'm experiencing, rather than externalizing it and going like, that's what I want, that's what I must have, but rather looking behind and say, what is this actually telling me about my circumstances right now? And so that's is that, and I do believe that it is a process of training, that we do train ourselves to start to notice these things that arise and start to have that level of self-kindness that we put across onto ourselves to go, I'm not going to blame myself for having this, but I'm actually going to investigate it with a bit of kindness into that. Okay, so we have Laura's asked a question. Is it important to communicate your values within your workplace, or should you keep them close to your chest? What a great question, Laura. Maybe I'll take this for a moment, Brooke, as we'll go to you for questions about that. It's an interesting one, right? I think we rarely see people actively communicating their values for no reason. I think that there are times, I mean, obviously, when we go into group kind of professional development days, we might investigate that a little bit more. But I work in the mental health field. I work in a field where we're all very in touch with our well-being and our care for ourselves. But I don't think there's something that we have organically kind of talked about in our workplace, but we recognize and we respect what people are doing for their lives. And I think if we bring that level of respect for ourselves and that self-kindness for ourselves, but when we can put that onto others as well, then we don't expect people to communicate their boundaries or their values to us. We have the respect that people are their masters of their own and they're experts of their own lives, that they know what they're doing in that space. But at the same time, communicating what you might need. So if in essence that is something that's going to impact on your work, that's something that might need to be communicated. Like, I need to pick my kids up at 3 p.m. I don't have to say because family is my highest value at this point, but also you can, by saying that, that kind of insinuates or indicates that family is really important to you, and therefore I might need to cut down my working hours each day. I might need to take a pay cut for accommodating some. And certainly many people in my team do those things to accommodate their lives, and it is for us, we never see that negatively because we know that there is something that is a direct equation for them as well, that they've taken those steps. How about you, Brooke?
Yes, I think definitely. I mean, if others, a key point that I've added to my notes there is that I really sort of discovered from these topics, chatting with Lisa before this, is around the relationships in the workplace. And so I think you are probably casually, if someone really is in tune and thinking about you as a person, will hopefully be picking up casually in some of those things. If you are having some small talk situations, in the kitchen, if you're online together before a video call, in those sort of conversations as well. I think often, we don't really formally have the opportunities to present those values, or it might sometimes come across as like a restriction, like you're wanting to ask for more flexibility because of something. But I would hope that if we focus on those relationships, hopefully there is that awareness as well. And definitely reflecting on myself in a more traditional workplace environment in my early career in particular, I definitely was too task focused. I was not enough relationship focused. So that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice, looking back and reflecting, is if I had a focus on that more, which I did towards the end before starting Marketing Bud, life seems easier. You get along with everyone easier. You understand others easier, and you can still achieve those tasks without just being so task focused at the beginning. So that's sort of a bit of a jump from where we were there, but hopefully that relationship is the key.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's something that I've learned in my years as well, that relationships are at the core of everything, of every business transaction that you're doing, of every understanding of every negotiation, everything. Relationships are at the core of that. And I think a lot of times the way our education system is structured, that we focus a lot on outcomes, deliverables, words on a page and things like this. Like, we have this very concrete way of viewing the world, when actually a lot of these non-definable kind of qualities, like relationship building skills, communication skills, that non-definable in terms of a work output, are probably the most crucial parts of work. And outcomes of work as well. So I love that you touch upon relationships. I think that's one of the huge things that I take away from my experience as well, is that the emphasis on building relationships and thinking about people really not just as a resource or as a business or as a client, but really as people, and really understanding that relationships are the foundation for everything. So I think that's really
more clearly answer that. I probably just should have said yes. I don't think you should keep them close to your chest because I think what we're sort of discovering from today as well is that if it's not the right fit for you long term, then there is probably the opportunity to start chatting with others in other industries, learning about other opportunities in advance of making potential moves if it's not the right fit with your values.
Excellent. Laura, are we at time?
Yes, I was just going to pop back in there and just say thank you so much for your time and for your questions and for your honesty. Lisa, your research was just amazing. I loved the face it until you make it. Sounds much more authentic than fake it, and I think that it sounds much more professional as well. So it's that's a great approach. And also Brooke spoke about the importance of taking opportunities to grow and to not be afraid of them. And the boundaries of self-care and like your values are never set and forget. So it's always evolving. I think what we've learned too is that we're all evolving all the time, yourself, but also those you work with and the environment that you're in. And so that, as you were saying just at the end there, relationships are key, and understanding the people in your area and taking time to focus on that tends to make everything easier as well in general, and allows you to grow. So I think key messages were we all have days where we feel like we're not the shiniest star, but important to find strategies to keep going and to use it as an opportunity for growth. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. It's great to have you on the call. The recording will be available after today's session. We'll get it onto our website as soon as possible and share it with you if you want to re-watch it and get some more advice, or share it with friends and colleagues. I just wanted to quickly mention our Alumni to Alumni mentoring program, which is a great opportunity for you to connect with experienced industry professionals who have volunteered their time to mentor people entering the workforce or experiencing career change, who need some a sounding board. The mentoring program also within the next couple of months is going to launch a values profile opportunity. So you'll be able to complete a survey that will help you identify what your values are in the workplace. And as Lisa was talking about today, that's very important to know. So please, if you're not already a member of that, please do have a look and see if that's something that you think would help support your journey. But just to close today, we have a short timeline video we thought we'd share with you as the university is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. If you haven't already, I encourage everybody to visit the 50th anniversary website and join in the festivities and events happening in the second half of the year to celebrate this milestone. And our next early career alumni event will be in Brisbane on the 4th of September. So please look out for an invitation for that. It's a unique networking opportunity with some of our key experienced alumni. So please look out for the invitation for that in the coming weeks. Again, a huge thank you to both Lisa and Brooke. Very, very grateful for your time. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll show you this video now and we'll see you next time.
50 years ago, it started as a spark, a bold vision to be a different kind of university, one that challenges tradition, creates new solutions, and confronts the social and environmental issues of its time. Since then, we've been building a legacy of innovation and impact, consistently turning ambitious ideas into lasting change, with every milestone reflecting the power of a university that dares to think differently. At Griffith, we don't just embrace change, we predict it. What mattered 50 years ago matters even more today. What began as a bold idea has grown into a global community of over 300,000 students, staff, and alumni. Our work is grounded in our values, making education accessible to all, respect for our natural environment, a dedication to social justice, and amplifying First Nations knowledge and culture. These principles define how we educate, lead, and connect with the world around us. reimagining what's possible in teaching, research and engagement. Together, we'll continue to create a brighter future, one that benefits as many people as possible.